Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to our Road to Recovery series of panel discussions. We expect our future actions to be impacted by our learnings from this crisis, and these would play out as we set out to achieve accelerated recovery as well as build stronger barriers against future risk. Today is the final of our five-part series where we cover going digital, harnessing the power of technology. Our panelists will bring to bear their experience to deliberate about drivers and key enablers driving digitalization, how digitalization has ensured business continuity during the pandemic, and how they see business harnessing the benefits of digitization going forward. A little bit about ASA and Associates and our guests today. ASA and Associates is a 30-year-old accounting and consulting firm with a team of over 700 professionals spread across 8 offices in India, besides an active network of national and international affiliations. We work with our clients, many from overseas, to help them set up offices and factories in India, find partners, take care of their taxation, audit, accounting and business support requirements, GST advisory, risk advisory services, and help with restructuring and liquidations as well. Chairing this session is Vinod Sood. Vinod is the co-founder and managing director of Hughes Systique Corporation, an award-winning software solutions and services company that has been instrumental in steering the digital transformation journey of its clients from the forefront. Currently on the board of Hughes Communications, Vinod was earlier the head of global engineering and R&D at Hughes Software Systems and served on its board as well. Prior to that, Vinod worked with CDOT, where he was part of the core team which designed India's first digital switch. An alumnus of PEC Chandigarh and a veteran of high-tech software industry for the last 35 years, Vinod has built high-performance teams at premier R&D organizations in India. Vinod is very active in supporting startups. He's mentor advisor to a number of young entrepreneurs and is on various juries of CII, NASSCOM, TIE, and to identify promising startups. Our first panelist today is Vinod Sood, Group CEO, Lumax DK Jain Group. He has been associated with the Lumax DK Jain Group since 2013, a leading manufacturer and supplier of automotive components and systems in India. A graduate in mechanical engineering from Delhi College of Engineering, Vinod started his career with Tata Motors in 1987 and has held various positions of increasing responsibility over the years with leading auto component manufacturers. Our second panelist is MP Vijay Kumar, CFO SIFI Technologies, one of India's largest integrated ICT solutions and services company, offering end-to-end solutions with a comprehensive range of products delivered over a common telecom data network infrastructure. He was a key member of SIFI's transformation into a leading enterprise IT infra and services player. Vijay Kumar is a Bachelor of Commerce from Andhra University, Chartered Accountant, Cost and Management Accountant, and a Company Secretary. Prior to SIFI, Vijay was a partner with Yoganathan and Ram for more than 8 years and was head investment banking at Sundaram Finance Services for 8 years. Our third panelist is Vikram Gupta, founder, managing partner at Ivicap Ventures, a venture capital firm focused on healthcare, technology, and e-commerce sectors. Vikram has over 25 years of experience in private equity, business consulting, M&A, strategy, and operations across various industries. Prior to founding Ivicap, he was the founding member at a healthcare-focused private equity fund that he conceptualized and raised in 2008. In his earlier tenures, Vikram has worked with IBM Business Consulting Services, US, and has also held senior positions with various well-known Indian companies. Vikram completed his BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Delhi and is a distinguished alumnus in IIT Delhi. He also has an MBA degree from Case Western Reserve University, Ohio, USA. Our final panelist is Sandeep Gupta, partner, accounting and business support and indirect tax, ASA and Associates. Sandeep spearheads the accounting and business support and indirect tax practice of the firm in the Delhi NCR region with 30 years of experience in industry and consulting, setting up of statutory and internal systems and procedures, as well as risk-based audits, cross-border treasury operations, M&A, etc. He advises on accounting, tax, and regulatory compliances of listed and non-listed corporates and corporate taxation. Spearheading indirect taxes, he has held various corporates through GST change management and routinely assists them on various compliances and GST advisory on complex issues. He is a qualified chartered accountant and holds a diploma in information systems audit and a certificate course on indirect taxes from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He is also a prolific speaker on many forums. Before we begin, here are a few instructions for the webinar. Please note that all participants will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the questions section in the chat. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A. A link with the recording to this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow afternoon. Also note that each of these webinars have a separate link and these will be emailed to you on the day of the webinar. Kindly reach out to us if you have any difficulty with this. Thank you, and over to you, Vinod.
Thank you, Manoj. Good afternoon, friends and my co-panelists. First of all, I would like to thank ASA and Associates and especially Ajay for organizing this series of webinars on very, very important and topical subjects. So for today, the subject is going digital, harnessing the power of technology. As we know, this is last in the series of webinars organized by ASA with the theme Road to Recovery. The topic for today is going digital. Okay. It is very appropriate that we are taking this topic last. The first 4 webinars in some aspect or other pointed to the need for enterprises and businesses adopting technology and going digital if they have to revive and then thrive as they negotiate the impact and after effects of COVID. We keep hearing these terms, digital disruption or transformation or going digital. Whatever we may call this phenomena, in my view, more than disruption, it is really a new way of thinking. It is not just about technology in isolation, but how technology becomes all pervasive and gets integrated in all aspects of enterprise, right from enhancing the customer experience, redesigning and reconfiguring business processes and operations to make them more optimal, efficient, and friction-free. I believe that to derive the real value from digital transformation, enterprises need to embrace and embed technology in all their business operations, resulting in overall changes in business models and how businesses operate and deliver value to the customers. This current pandemic has demonstrated the importance of digitalization and how it has enabled businesses and enterprises to continue their operations by providing resilience, adaptability, and security. Digitalization has ensured continuity of supply chains, has supported remote working of large proportion of the workforce, has enabled data access and optimal use of resources, in addition to the obvious benefits of digitalization, which are increased efficiency and optimization, leading to higher margins and competitive advantage, democratizing access by providing opportunities at scale, enhanced customer and user experience, and being a business enabler by creating not just new business models, but even entirely new businesses. I believe digitalization will increase in importance in the years to come, accelerated by the fallout of COVID. Digital will be the backbone and growth post-COVID, helping build back the confidence, especially in small and medium enterprises. All types of companies across regions and industries are embracing digital transformation. Right from the way individuals work and collaborate to the way business processes are executed, or the way companies understand and serve customers, digital transformation is providing tremendous opportunities. In the long run, digitalization has far-reaching impact to change the overall working of our larger society by bringing in transparency and efficiency. The future definitely will be driven by a digital ecosystem of companies rather than only one firm or one company going it alone. Now, very quickly, I would because I come from the technology background, and the topic is harnessing the power of technology, let me very quickly talk about the key technologies which are enabling digital transformation. So the first and foremost is cloud computing. Cloud computing is a fundamental element which is powering digital transformation. It offers scalability and agility that is needed for this transformation. Cloud enables IoT, enterprise level security, and very quick prototyping and application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Enterprise mobility is another key enabler of digital transformation. Enterprise mobility enables employees to be connected to the fundamental business processes, access to various applications to interact and provide a collaborative platform. And last but not the least, security, I think, is the most critical factor. More than 60% of digital businesses will suffer major service disruption due to security issues. Typically, the aspect of security comes in late, and it takes an ongoing project to fail to make stakeholders realize the importance of security in digital transformation. Digital transformation and security policies must be planned and implemented simultaneously to contain threats and prevent outages. Before I ask my fellow panelists to share their views and their thoughts around these topics, I would like to very quickly talk about maybe a couple of key ingredients or success factors which make digitalization succeed or fail. And I'm sure my fellow panelists are going to spend more time and dwell on some of these and bring in some new perspectives. So first and foremost, I think digitalization needs to be driven from the top. As I said, it's a change in mindset. It's not just implementing new technologies, but also transforming the organization within to take advantage of the possibilities that new technologies provide. Related to this is the key aspect of building skill set, competencies, and appreciation and understanding of technology at all levels across the organization. Ability to connect business and technology, that is something which is very, very key. Creating an environment which promotes and encourages continuous learning. I think that is the only way to stay relevant when the velocity of change and the technology disruption is very high. So with that, I would like to stop and would like to request my panelist, Vinod, to share his thoughts and views on this subject of going digital or digital transformation. Vinod, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Vinod. And very aptly said. Whatever you said, I fully, corroborate your views. I come from manufacturing, a very brick and mortar industry, and which is very different. So this industry has a typical nature, which is people. We have many people as compared to any other industry. And therefore, the responsibility at leadership is very different, because when you have a situation like pandemic, where you don't know what's going to happen, and you come with a lot of responsibilities on not only on the cost front, but on the people front as well. One good thing that has happened, and which is causing the digital transformation or technology transformation, that all companies, wherever they work in, and entire world has been put to similar kind of a constraint. And that has made a big difference. People have started understanding each other, and therefore the transformation is faster. Earlier, in a similar situation, there would be a lot of resistances in various agencies, and things used to take longer time. So that's a blessing in disguise that everybody came into the same kind of a situation. Now, Our training in manufacturing has been, just to give you a background, is a little different. You know, we are talked about the productivity, saving of space, people management, talking to them personally, building culture. That's how we grew up in brick and mortar and manufacturing industry. But when pandemic came in, situation was absolutely opposite. The direction was to keep distance between people. You know, the direction was do not meet personally. How do you're used to motivating people, meeting them, talking to them. And that also meant changing of layouts of manufacturing plants, because our layouts were not designed to have a 6 feet or a 12 feet distance between the two people. Plus handling of the parts. People handle parts, and a virus was quite contagious. So how to manage that? Also, we being automotive, lot of work is done in air conditioned environment. So in pandemic, how do you manage that? Because you're not allowed to use the closed air conditioning environment. So then pandemic came in. I divided pandemic into, today I can share with you, into 4 phases. And I am sure all of us would have gone through the same process. The first phase was, yes, it will pass. Nothing big, it will pass. An example is we had wonderful auto expo in February 2nd week, buzzing with activity, people hugging each other. And March, things changed. Right. Second phase was doom phase, as if everything was over. Because we never in our lifetime experienced zero revenue for 3 months. Never, ever. It was first time. So it was like a doom situation. And as leader, we went through a lot of emotions. What do you do with the people? What happened? It's a lot of emotions going up. And today I'll be talking of my personal experiences, realistic thing that happened, you know. Third phase was green shoots. We saw something happening, right? And fourth is a V-shaped recovery in automotive. Now, if you see the spectrum, they are diametrically opposite from first phase 1 to phase 4. And out of these phases, for today, I classified the whole digital transformation into 3 buckets. One, ratification of the decision on technology taken before pandemic, which helped us in handling this situation. Second was expediting certain decisions on technology, which were in incubation but did not see the light of the day or was in experimentation state. That was the second bucket. And third, having realized the importance of digital transformation, what is the plan for complete transformation in the organization? Because this is a must. This is required in the organization. I will just give you small examples and for other panelists to think about it. A couple of years ago, we started a simple thing called employee app. It's around 3 years ago. And honestly, that helped us so much in digitally communicating to employees, because for us, communication to 10,000 people was important. But since we had that and we had each employee downloaded that for communication, we quickly upgraded to various other things coming into that, and we could communicate with our family of 10,000 people very well, and that really helped. Right. Second was our investments in the past into our for example, digitization of our finances, banking payments, supplier portal, where the payments are automatically done. And, so that really helped us in real-time tracking of our costs. We moved immediately from lag indicators to lead indicators, and that really helped us. Second bucket was, expediting and pushing certain decisions. And here I would like to give example. We started in a small way, like a pilot manufacturing execution system, where you digitally control your machines, and you know their energy consumptions, you know their nature of work, your equipment efficiencies. So that we pushed to horizontally deploy immediately, because we could manage our plant remotely. Right. And also, when you talk about future, what is going to work, we have to move to Industry 4.0. And that is where, if you ask me, I would like to make a touchless organization as much as possible and digitally controlled through cloud computing or IoT, which Industry 4.0 provides that platform. And there comes the artificial intelligence, because decision making also has to go digital based on the data and computing. So that is what I think will be in future, and we are building up a concrete plan in our organization, because that's what we feel is a right way to move forward, and not only to face any such pandemic, but to make the organization more efficient in future. So these are my views, and we can then debate later. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod, for not just sharing your experiences, but also the challenges you and the organization went through. And it was very interesting to hear that the entire digital transformation process into three buckets of ratification, expediting it, and the complete transformation. So very, very interesting. MP, can I now ask you to share your perspective around this topic?
Sure. Thanks, Vinod. It was a pleasure listening to you and Vinith. Greetings to all, and trust all are safe and near and dear ones healthy. I'll try to keep it short, as we have over time heard quite a bit on digitalization. In fact, the previous series number 4 on this webinar, I did hear it in full. And that topic also, almost all the panelists were unanimous on the importance of digitalization. Let me share some 5 perspectives from my experience. Of course, Vinod, Vinith, and Vikram are hardcore techies, so I guess they will pardon me if I make some technical errors in my expressions. One is that digitalization and digital transformation are quite different. It's important not to confuse between the two. Digitalization is more about doing the activities which we have been doing as in the past, largely physical or through a simple computer systems on a digital mode, whereas digital transformation is about a new way of doing business, a different customer experience, a different way of doing the whole thing. At a very simplistic level, the online banking is digitalization, where what was done physically at the branch is now done online. Whereas digital transformation is a complete new way of doing activities, which typically some of these fintech companies like Paytm, Google Pay, etc. offer. Some companies will be fit for digitalization only given the nature of business. And while digitalization can be led by a group of IT professionals, digital transformation has to be necessarily be CXO led and with full involvement of business heads, because it's an altogether different way of doing the business. Digitalization and digital transformation are quite independent, and it is also important that digitalization is not necessarily a first step for someone to think of digital transformation. Second, we are fortunate to have extensive government involvement in both digitalization and digital transformation of government services. Globally, information technology has always been, particularly the spend on IT, has been led by government, including defense and BFSI segment, and India is no exception. Of late, retail, media, telecom are also driving significant spends on information technology, including evolution of new technologies. In my view, GST, which was rolled out by the government in 2017, is a big example of digital transformation, and it is less to do with a taxation reform. While the implementation of GST is in phases, e-way bill, e-invoicing, matching of input and output, etc. The impact of this will be quite substantial. Another example is the faceless assessment in income tax, which the government is currently rolled out. Third, we at CIFI are a converged information communications and technology player with leadership in enterprise network services, co-location services, and cloud and security services. I would endorse what Vineet and Vinod have mentioned, that we are witnessing almost all corporates actively evaluating their digital journey. And as Vineet just mentioned, there are many projects which were sort of an incubation stage, and organizations are now giving it that extra push. And I'm sure once the visibility of future is clear, automobile industry got that gift so early in terms of a V-shaped recovery. I'm sure the rest of the Indian enterprises will scale up with investments in this direction. Fourthly, a good reason of why the digitalization and even digital transformation is happening and will happen at a kind of pace which we are now witnessing is the information technology infrastructure, including cloud computing, which both of them have referred, which used to be dedicated and hence was costly, as most enterprises were paying for lot of unused infrastructure and were spending in managing the same. It is now available on utility model where enterprises pay based on consumption. And I have experienced at CIFI that many customers are now willing to move the path of an outcome-based billing models, not even consumption-based. And that's the way to go. The beauty is cost is less, it is OPEX, variable to the scale of earnings, and you can scale at will. And equally importantly, you get the best of the infrastructure. And the companies will get this IT infrastructure with more than needed redundancy and the best-in-class experts working on managing the same. Lastly, in the pandemic over the last 7-8 months, companies have realized how difficult it is to manage mission-critical infrastructure, be it upgrades, replacements, getting people to work 24/7, etc. All of them have been challenging. And the companies have now concluded that these are best handled by third-party service providers. So you move from having your on-premise data rooms to the cloud, where one also gets better quality infra and services at lower cost. The emotion of keeping IT infra close to chest is gone, just as each of us here prefer cash at bank and jewels in bank lockers than at home. Over to you, Vinod, and I will come back later as part of the interaction.
So thanks, MP, and very importantly, I think you brought out this distinction between digitalization and digital transformation. I think that is very, very important, and all of us need to understand. And secondly, in terms of how the governments have embraced digital transformation and this entire e-governance, which pretty much is being powered by this digitalization and which is making all these services, the government services, available to the citizens at scale, at places which earlier it would not have been even possible to provide those services. So thanks, Vijay. Now over to you, Sandeep, if you can share your thoughts on this topic.
Sure. Thank you, Vinod. A very good afternoon to everybody, my fellow panelists and participants on this webinar. This pandemic has, proven to everybody that there is always a different way of doing things. We have been forced in a certain way. It has also taught us one very clear picture that going forward, if we are not going to be digitally savvy, if we are not going to radically transform our organizations on the digital journey, it would be extremely difficult to do business, because I personally feel this pandemic has been a reality check for everybody. You know, it has been a shock for those who were like fence sitters on adapting to technology or adopting technology, and it has been like a boon for people who have already embarked on their digital journey years back. I mean, it's, if I may use the term quantum leap, this pandemic has actually been an opportunity for a quantum leap for all the organizations onto the path of digital transformation. You know, the Vinod spoke about his manufacturing sector of a brick and mortar. He was affected in a very different way because, as he said, their interactions with people were very high. The manufacturing facilities need to be physically manned. Whereas in our case, I belong to the consulting, the service industry, we were impacted in a very different way. Now, if I may share my experience, we at ASA began our digital journey quite a few years back. You know, we had already gone through that process of not just AI, but AI, as I call it, which is assessment, identification, and implementation. So we had embarked on the journey quite a few years back, and I'm very happy to say that when the pandemic hit India, we were fully prepared for it. In fact, if I may just share, Ajay, our managing partner, had actually foreseen this lockdown happening, and before 22nd of March, 10 days before, we were already doing a testing of a lockdown in staggered phases with our different teams, so that to test out our internal systems, our infrastructure and processes as to where there could be a roadblock. And then when the lockdown actually happened, we were almost like, it was like a seamless movement for us, for our teams, to move the workstations from the office environment into the home. We handle a lot of assignments for various clients all across the country and across the globe. And, you know, going on to the digital journey became like a seamless experience from one, I would say, or maybe two very critical aspects which have been mentioned. One, Vinod, you mentioned one, the cloud part. So because our data and our application systems were already on cloud, we could seamlessly move people away from the hardcore office desks and benches onto their homes. The second part, which was very critical, and it's very critical for the consulting industry, is data privacy. And there security played a very crucial role. You know, from our perspective as handling the client's data, which is extremely confidential, the primary concern of every client is how confidential is their data going to be? Is there any security breach? And since we had already taken those initial steps to maintain to build up the security firewalls, not the firewalls as the technical firewalls, I'm simply talking about a periphery that, you know, build the adequate safeguards around your data security. I think it proved to be a very, very seamless and easy experience. And coupled with that, you know, we also embarked on that journey of helping our clients adapt to this new normal, if I may use the term, because the world is certainly not going to be the same anymore. Whether the new normal is already here or we are going to see it, once this pandemic is over, I personally feel it will not be the same way of doing business in most of the areas. You know, while some areas we could see a repeat of going back to the previous systems and processes, but most of them we will see a transformation going forward. So this is, I would say, that has been our experience on this pandemic, on this journey. But overall, the underlying thought remains: digitalization and digital transformation, as Vijay has very clearly pointed out, two different things, but both will be equally important in way forward of doing business in the new normal, in not only the post-pandemic era, but even from today when the world is now opening up When the recovery is, you call it either the V-shaped recovery or the U-shaped recovery, whichever way. But this is certainly going to be a way of life, and we have to adapt to it. These would be my initial thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep, and very interesting to hear the experiences which you went through, and the fact that going the digital path few years early, how it helped not just you and your company in negotiating these challenges and the current pandemic, but also helping your clients and customers and guiding them through this entire process. And another thing which you touched upon, and in fact, one of the questions which I see from the audience, and I think you answered that while sharing your thoughts, was this entire issue about data privacy and confidentiality. And I don't think there could be anybody better than you folks, because you handle, as you said, data and information of your clients, which is very, very confidential. And the way you could manage, I think that was very, very enlightening. Thank you. So now over to you, Vikram, to share your thoughts on this topic.
Thanks, Vinod, and it's great to hear the views of my co-panelists, and thank you so much for sharing your views. I'll give you my perspective from the venture capital industry. I run a venture capital fund, and we invest right from 1 crore at seed stage, going up to Series B, Series C, where we invest up to 50 crores. And these are primarily technology companies or technology-driven companies. Of course, it's been a very interesting experience for us. We are a fully homegrown venture capital fund. We raised our entire capital in India from domestic institutions and investors. I have witnessed very interesting trends. And what I notice is that, when we look at the current year and starting from, March itself, or even before that, in fact, the pandemic actually started in China, and I was actually in China in December. In January, I was in Switzerland, and then I was in Tokyo, and then I was in February, I was in Singapore. And when I came back to India in March, we hit the pandemic lockdowns. I think we as venture capital investors, we've seen very interesting, things emerging. One is, of course, if you just look at how the pandemic happened over the over the last few months. In March, April, in fact, April, we saw almost every company in our portfolio going down to zero revenues, because the supply chains were all broken. There were issues around, deliveries, and there were issues, lots of issues. Except that there were B2B SaaS companies, which are pure technology companies using tech platforms. They did actually very well. In fact, some of our companies in fintech actually increased substantially even during the initial period. But it was very interesting to see how it kind of phased out, and different sectors actually reacted very differently. If you look at the consumer sector, so we've invested in online, offline consumer companies like Clovia, which is a lingerie company, or a Purple, which is an online beauty and personal, Bluestone, which is an online, offline jewelry company. And we saw a very interesting trend for these companies. April, May was completely washed out. But what we noticed in the last few months is that they have come back in a very interesting way, where the slope now of growth that they're picking is actually far steeper than what they would have imagined even before pandemic. So which means that if I'm looking at the third year numbers, sitting in February versus now, I actually believe that their 3 years numbers will look even much higher than what they would have seen in the month of February. So, which is a very interesting trend which we are seeing there. Then, if you look at healthcare and education, which are very interesting sectors, and I think these are the two sectors I would say which benefited the most during pandemic. We noticed very quick movement among startups who actually came up and actually really took the opportunity, and especially whether it was telemedicine or anything to do with the remote kind of monitoring, etc. Of course, healthcare, anything to do with the physical touch points with the patients, etc. Any hospitals were impacted negatively because their the inpatient kind of volume went down substantially on the non-COVID side, and of course they were impacted quite heavily because of that. But the tech or the health tech, we saw a substantial positive movement. Similarly, on the education side, we noticed quite substantial positive movement. In fact, some of the transactions which you would have you would have also seen. Things like what you saw in companies like White Hat Junior, which just started just 2 years before they actually got sold to Baiju for $100 million, and this was like from 0 to 300 in almost no time. And this is something very interesting example of how some of these edtech companies moved during this time. And of course, financial services, we also noticed it was a mixed kind of a thing. For example, we have a company called FingPay, which is actually in the rural banking space. They have a platform for helping rural customers to do banking transactions, and primarily because of the huge movement of manpower from urban areas to remote or tier 2, tier 3, and even rural areas. There were huge banking requirements in rural areas, which we realized, companies like FingPay have actually grown substantially during this time, almost 300% actually during a 6-month period, which to us was very interesting. Of course, there were quite a few companies which were quite negatively impacted, or a few sectors. In fact, some of them, as we know, will get impacted permanently, like travel, hospitality. In fact, there were 3,000 startups in the travel and transportation sector, which were operating and which had raised at least the seed level of funding and looking to raise their funding. And 90% of those startups were impacted directly, many of them shut down because of the pandemic, and many others pivoted to new business models. And I think, that also gave opportunity to a new wave of entrepreneurs emerging from different sectors. In fact, one more thing which we noticed is that, lots of people came from corporate world and turned entrepreneurs. And on the other hand, there were quite a few people who were entrepreneurs who could not survive the pandemic, went back to the corporate world. So, some of these changes which have happened are very interesting. But I think in the bigger picture, as venture capital fund, we always look at a much longer term time frame. In fact, such time frames we also always look at opportunities for us. So we actually continue to make investments, and we announced about 4 investments in the last 6 months, and we are looking to make a few more investments over the next 2 months. And we believe that, given exactly the way what Vinod mentioned earlier in terms of the opportunities in the manufacturing space, for example, we are seeing technologies like robotics, AI, ML, IoT actually being used in manufacturing. And similarly, what Vijay talked about, it was very interesting to hear the difference between digitalization and digital transformation. I think absolutely, this is what the startups in India are actually, cashing on in terms of the entire digital transformation movement which is happening in India. And we do believe that, and I think, Vinod, what you also talked about, the entire cybersecurity and enterprise security and mobility. also, going through transformation, and technologies like blockchain, and even AR, VR, we are seeing a huge potential for, use cases or new kinds of use cases building up. In fact, I was at IIT Delhi convocation very recently, first week of November, and it was very interesting to see how the entire session was conducted. A lot of technology used for everybody to come together, and I think that is going to be the norm going forward. Any such large gatherings can be accomplished without actually people meeting physically, and I think some of these changes are permanent and actually even becoming more productive for the actual businesses, and which is something which we are seeing on the ground. So I think overall, as a venture capital investor, I definitely see this as an opportunity for us from investment perspective, and therefore, these are good times in that sense.
Great. Thank you, Vikram, for sharing your views and the impact on startups, and this very interesting trend that in fact what we are seeing is that some of the startups, in terms of their growth, they are seeing much steeper growth now. So very, very, very interesting, and also good to hear that you are seeing a lot of opportunities and you continue to make investments. So it's not all doom and gloom. Thank you very much. So coming back to you, Vineet, I have observation, and since you come from the manufacturing industry, right, which is the brick and mortar industry, right? Why do you think it required a pandemic for the companies, right, especially in the brick and mortar sector, see the need to digitize or digitally transform? I should say, not just digitalization, because digitalization, yeah, use of IT was happening, but in terms of real digitalization and the move to cloud, why did it take the pandemic? And the thought I had, or something which I'm wondering is, didn't companies in the brick and mortar sector see some of their peers who had adopted digitalization see the benefits? So your thoughts on this topic?
So very good question, Vinod, and I feel embarrassed answering that actually, because we are, a brick and mortar, it seems to be a traditional company, and we follow, a disciplined guideline into automotive, and a little, I would say, reluctant to experiment and be very creative as other companies of IT are. Having said that, we have been experimenting in small pockets of digitalization, which helped us. In fact, what I shared with you regarding employee app, we were the first one in the industry to do that. And in fact, that came into my mind, and that became a very important communicating tool. But also, what is important is the culture. I think we need to work on two things. What you said initially, in a bottle, the bottleneck is always on the top. The leadership in manufacturing industry comes by age. For example, you will find, I am at a particular age and experience. I am leading as a group CEO. I need to change my mindset faster than anybody else. And similarly, our leadership team. In a typical digital company, there are young leaders. There a person in their 30s could be leading the organization, and therefore they are more exposed to such kind of things. So I think one is to crack this bottleneck on the top, which has emerged today's discussion. Second is to consistently change that culture in the organization, because ultimately it is the skill of the people, garbage in and garbage out. Digital also has to be managed by right people. So their skills, their education background, that everything needs to change, right? So we have realized that maybe it's a wake-up call. I don't mind saying that, it happens. But the point is, we are awake now and we need to change. And I think that is important.
Very, very good. Good to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming to you, MP, since you come from the networking and IT infrastructure background, right, at SIFI, my question is, what should be done to bridge the digital divide in India and similar countries, right? Worldwide, if you see, there are 750 million people who have no access to internet whatsoever. Uh, there are 3 billion people who have coverage, who have internet access, but really speaking, no meaningful access to digital services, right? And this is, as we know, a huge problem which hampers digital adoption and sharing the benefits of digitalization, right, or going digital. So if you can share your thoughts on this, and also if you can briefly share your thoughts around this entire issue, or this thing which is always of our minds regarding the security aspects, right?
Sure, Vinod. I'm a firm believer that while India may not in near future catch up with other major developed countries on physical infrastructure, we have a great opportunity to be ahead of them on the digital infrastructure, as there is no need for a lag between the rest of the world and India on technology adoption now. For India, in respect of digital infrastructure, the beauty is the per capita cost is low thanks to our population, especially the demographic advantage we have and the ability to scale. Look at the cost of telecom services. We are the lowest in the world. And what more better example can be there? And we have all witnessed the last 5 years in particular, how this component of digital infrastructure, one component of digital infrastructure, which is on data, has transformed the way IT is consumed in India. Also, India has ability to add tons of content given the diversity, whether it's language or whatever other elements, which will push lot of entertainment as well as cultural integration.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the initial months of pandemic, myself and my family have viewed movies of all possible languages, as we had to kill time on few days not knowing what to do, but eventually started enjoying them, understanding the culture of various other states. Now let me share my thoughts on 3 key elements to be addressed on super high priority to bridge this gap of digital infrastructure. First and foremost, on adoption. We will add 33% more mobile connects in the next 3 years, but only 12% on fiber connect. So while mobile connectivity will grow, the fixed connectivity, the fiber, is still a concern. And we have to ensure that fiber connectivity scales much bigger than the 12% which we are now looking at. Second, in terms of coverage, 227 million people in rural India versus 205 million in urban India are online. Yet, rural infrastructure, I referring to IT infrastructure, the coverage growth is only 7% annually. This can be the spoiler for sunrise industries like edutech. In fact, I'm so happy that so much is happening on the edutech and the healthcare space. And the beauty of online is those living in tier 3, tier 4 and rural can get access to the best of education and the best of healthcare with this kind of digital infrastructure. But the serious concern is on the rural side, the infrastructure is pretty low. Third, on network redundancy, the transport consistency in rural areas, I'm referring to the data transport, is lesser than urban areas. Call drops, etc. We are all familiar. All the more important in the rural areas is fixed network. And some of the problem areas we need to address if we have to get the benefit of all this digitalization and digital transformation. In the context of education, it's all about providing access to people beyond urban. Currently, all the large edutech companies have their subscription coming from tier 1 or maybe tier 2, but there's so much to reach out in tier 3 and tier 4. We have issues still around power connectivity for giving good IT infrastructure. There are topography problems with reference to uniformity of coverage, and internet, given the kind of prepaid packages which is predominant in India, is still a minor component of recharge packages. Voice is still major. And on the infrastructure side, when there is circle switches happening, that's still not yet seamless. So a lot of work to do. Couple of important action items, as I would see, is creating more network points of presence, uniform benchmarked data speed from all service providers. 256, 512 and all is not at all a service. Right. We have to go much beyond that. Move from plan-based subscription to service fulfillment-based payments. And that's a major transformation which will have to happen. Now, let me share some thoughts on cybersecurity and something which I am closely involved. So maybe I'll take a little extra minute. First and foremost, it is important to recognize that security, and in particular cybersecurity, is every stakeholder's responsibility. Also, equally important to realize that security is costly. Cyber security is high cost, but not having it will be fatal. Organizations will have to choose between death and survival while evaluating spend on security. I reiterate, security is costly and will continue to be high cost. Between physical and cyber security, the difference is in physical. The fear of security, risk of security threat is low, but it remains undetected for a long time. Whereas in cyber, the fear of risk of security threat is high, but it will get detected soon because it leaves such a huge impact on the organization. And in cyber, the quantum of theft in a single instance will be quite huge and difficult to trace. We think it's easy to trace, it's difficult to trace as new technologies keep evolving, and the people who breach security are many a time ahead of the technologies which are currently deployed. Here again, the tone at the top is super critical. And I know in today's session, we have many senior people attending the session. I noticed right from my experience as a practicing chartered accountant, most senior people have a tendency of giving passwords to their executive assistants. That tone at the top, that password is given for certain routine approvals, etc. as well. But that particular tone is so impactful that the rest of the organization also follows in their own way. And that is a starting point for security breaches. And cybersecurity encompasses anything related to storage or transmission of data and how it is protected and accessed or prevented from being accessed. We need to be conscious that data moves between various jurisdictions and different countries have different regulations and laws of how the data privacy and all works. So it's important that With reference to security, we have a 360-degree understanding of the laws surrounding data privacy as well. And lastly, cybersecurity is not just about technology and computers. It involves people, information, systems, processes, and culture. Cyber risk security is a growing risk to business, and it's part of every person's job. And I would reiterate my opening comment on this. Security is costly. Not having it is fatal. And it's in that context that organizations have to evaluate security. Thanks, Vinod, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, MP, and good that you spent some time talking about the security issues, because I see there are a lot of questions around that, and I think this definitely would have helped addressing those questions. So Vikram, coming to you, since you have a ringside view, given that you run a fund which invests in startups across various industries and verticals, where do you see funding coming for building a better digital infrastructure in India? And what role do you see public-private partnership and especially startups can play in this entire process of managing the digital infrastructure and also enabling and helping digital transformation or adoption of digital? And also, if you can briefly talk about the future of digitalization and how do you see it accelerating in the next couple of years?
Sure. So I think if you look at the sources of capital, what we are noticing is that the government is playing quite an active role these days. In fact, what we're noticing is that there are newer pools of capital which are being set up, whether it is a self-reliant India initiative or the fund of funds of the government, which is set aside 10,000 crores, so which is actually a very positive direction. But in addition to that, I think what we're also noticing is that there is a very high level of maturity amongst the corporates and also family offices which have been set up now over the last few years, who are actually either investing directly or indirectly into startups and various other initiatives. And on top of that, what we're also seeing is that a lot of foreign capital, in fact, one positive side for India of the pandemic is that there was a lot of capital which was directed to China from the developed countries and other countries who are looking to invest in China. I think they're pulling back from China and directing their capital to India. We've seen what has happened with the Jio, which raised over $21 billion during pandemic from some of the most marquee investors. And we know that most of that capital is going into really helping this entire digital movement. And in fact, that's already seen as examples in acquiring some of the startups that they've already started doing. But given the quantum of that capital which is coming into India from foreign investors, and not just, Jio is of course one very prominent example. What I think that there are investors, because of the visibility that India is getting now because of investments like these, there are investors who started coming and talking to VCs like us and asking for opportunities in India and therefore wanting to invest in India. So these are very positive moves which are happening. And I think from a private-public partnership perspective, and I think this is again something very interesting where because the government is setting up these pools of capital, there is this intent to really play an active role in the startup ecosystem, and I think that's actually quite positive because that's also encouraging creation of domestic pool of capital, which was very limited a few years ago, and I think government is taking very active role in building that. And I think some of these initiatives they are actually implementing in building very sector focused or outcome focused funds. And some of these funds are also getting directed through, for example, the Department of Science and Technology or Department of Biotechnology, Department of Electronics, and we're seeing a lot of funding getting channelized through some of these departments to partner with the venture capital funds like ours, and then therefore focus on investing in smart startup initiatives. And I think all this is actually a good kind of foundation being built up for the future of this. If you look at from a digitization perspective, I think we are going to see some fundamental changes happening, especially because if you look at the penetration of internet, which has happened in the last 8 months versus the previous 8 years, there's a quantum of difference in terms of how fast the internet has penetrated, into the whether it's rural or urban population. The other thing which we are seeing is that about 3 years ago, there were just about 60 million people transacting online in India from an e-commerce perspective, and I think that figure is almost doubled in no time, and we are seeing a lot more commerce happening online. And I think of course initially companies like Flipkart and then Amazon, obviously he made huge investments to really open up the entire sector and even making huge losses. And I think there is a complete change in mindset. Pandemic has done one very interesting thing, is that rather than a burning or a capital burning mindset, which was prevalent in the startup ecosystem, I think people have started focusing on their unit economics and profitability, which actually has created a lot more capital efficiency in the system. And last but not the least, something which is very, very interesting trend which we are seeing, which actually has got accelerated because of pandemic, is this whole market of impact investing. And I think even investors who are purely looking at returns, even they've started asking questions about how are we looking at making impact, and specifically, for example, we're talking about SDG goals, sustainable development goals. We're talking about what we will actually achieve by the year 2030, and they're very specific goals. We're talking about there are 17 goals and there are 169 targets, and we ourselves at IVCAP have actually started looking at these goals in very detailed manner and how they apply to our portfolio companies. And I think some of these things will actually change fundamentally the way we look at technology going forward. So I think I would say these are all positive moves, that will make a huge impact.
No, thanks, Vikram, and very, very heartening to hear the positive influence, right, all this is having on impact investment. So very, very. So Sandeep, with your background in accounting, fact that you work a lot on strategy, right? Customers in their strategic business planning, right? What do you think government and regulators need to do to fast track digitalization? So given advise clients on strategy, right? What do you think they need to do more to ensure that there is a seamless adoption across the board, right? And if you want very quickly, you may also like to touch upon this whole issue about data privacy, and more in terms of in relation to cross-border and data traveling across geographies and jurisdictions where the laws will and may be different.
Sure. Vinodji, I lost your voice for a minute in between, so I'll just repeat the questions in essence. One, on the government front, what the government should be doing in terms of transforming into digitalization. Second is with our experience, because we do a lot of work on the assisting our clients in adopting digital strategies and carrying on digital transformation. What are the key challenges, sort of, or what they should be doing more to do it better? And the third is on the data. Fine. So we are running out of time, so I'll probably take it very, very quickly. First, on our experience, I would like to share with whatever we have gained over these past few years in assisting our clients with their digital transformation strategies. Though there are obviously textbook approaches, but in very simple layman terms, I'll bring out the 4 or 5 key challenges which I've seen very common across the board. First and foremost is the understanding of what they require. You know, the wish list is huge. They start off with something very small, and as you engage into more and more discussions, it starts becoming bigger and bigger. So I would say a clarity of thought into what is required for their purposes, because digital transformation must be seen as an enabler to productivity. It should not be seen as just because the whole world is doing it, so I should be doing it. How it impacts your business has to be understood. So your understanding of the RFP has to be very, very clear. Second, I would say, and I think it has been covered by Vijay and by you also, any strategy, and Vinith has very succinctly put it with a thin bottle, every bottle has a thin funnel on top. Any strategy will not work if it does not have the conviction and the buy-in of the leadership team. It has to be led from the top. And along with that, the employee engagement and communication become a very critical factor. Both have to be married to each other. The communication has to flow down from the top, not with the seriousness of the intent alone, but the joy and the productivity and the efficiency that the whole transformation is going to bring up. So employee engagement and buy-in, I would say, is going to be a very, very significant challenge, which I have seen across the board happening. And there are obviously these psychological issues also one has to very ably deal with. You know, with technological advancement, the most common fear is, what will happen to my job? Is somebody going to take over my job? Machines are going to take over the job. So the employee engagement from the leadership teams becomes extremely critical. The third part, I would say, is choosing the right partner, tech partner for you is another critical factor, because just for the sake of saving costs, you know, normally one goes in without doing adequate due diligence on their tech partners. People choose their tech partners and then they find the project plundering around and not giving them the desired results. I mean, I'm reminded of a very old saying, and this may be very apt. I mean, you pay peanuts, you will get monkeys. So one should have a very judicious balance on what my investment is going to look like and what kind of a tech partner I'm choosing. I'm not saying expensive is always the best. I'm not saying that, but you have to have a sense of balance there. And then the fourth challenge across the board is that they do not have clarity in general as to how to measure the ROI on the deployments which they have made. So, you know, at times the deployments have actually resulted into an increased cost without yielding the adequate cost benefits also. So a structured approach towards determining the ROI on the investments in digital transformation is also a very key pillar. And as a last point, which is I would say a fallout of all these 4 pillars, is that whatever transformation one is working upon, one should always have that long-term vision in mind, that it should be agile and scalable. It should not be a very static kind of a structure which you are building up, because tomorrow you may just have to throw it out of the window and go into it afresh as a beginning of the goalpost. That should not happen. These, I would say, have been in general our experience with our past few years in helping various clients with their digital strategy. In terms of the government, government has been taking a lot of steps on digital transformation, digitalization. MCA was one of the first projects, I believe, the government started off digitizing their entire corporate law filings. income tax came the second, and GST, as Vijay ji has very correctly said, it was less of a tax reform and more of a technology reform for the entire country. I mean, of course, it's a significant tax reform also, but the way GST was put into operation, I would say, is like a case study for the rest of the world, considering the demography of India and the diversity of India with the complex tax laws. It's almost akin to setting the ship sailing in piecemeal while it has not been fully built, and then keep on building it while it has been sailing. And successfully, I'm very happy to say that the recent experience of the e-invoicing from 1st of October, almost like 50 million invoices in a month, and it has been a seamless experience for our clients. So now obviously various tech enablers are there in the process, but the government backbone and the infrastructure has been very robustly built. I think they have learned very carefully from the mistakes of the past when the e-way bill was rolled out initially. It completely failed, it crashed, and they had to defer it, and then they came back again online after 2 months. So I would say that while the government has been working on it for past many years, they must come out with a blueprint, a roadmap as to how they are going to implement technology in various sectors. From my understanding, I would say technology disruption has basically two aspects from a government angle. They should be looking at governance and they should be looking at growth. Both these aspects have to be satisfied from a government's angle, whether we are talking of a tax growth or a revenue growth or any other or an entire economy growth. I think these two enablers, the government must keep it in mind. At the same point of time, what the government must definitely look at it is the ease of use of the systems which they are putting. They should not be thrusting somebody some technology down the throat of the citizens of this country. You know, they have to do their testing at the back end. They have to realize what kind of infrastructure challenges which Vijay ji has touched upon. They are actually the existing challenges in our country, and based on those challenges, what is the best technology to deploy in what way? Those are the kind of things which government should be doing. And to add on to their advantage, they are now deploying it, but data analytics can actually prove to be a boon in terms of not just tax compliance, but governance also. On the third part, I would say is the government should also ease the use of sharing of data between their various departments. That is actually proving to be extremely cumbersome and harassment to the taxpayers or the citizens of this country, because the same data is asked for by different authorities at different points of time. Now, digitization brings with it the joy that everything is sitting on your computers in one way or the other. You must build in the data sharing mechanism, and it is for their own good. That if they do that, there is going to be an enormous amount of leap forward in governance, as well as I'm sure in tax revenues and curbing the tax avoidance and evasion techniques, which are very, very rampant across the board. Coming on to your third question in terms of data privacy, I think first and foremost, the understanding of the privacy laws is extremely critical for us wherever you are working on cross-border assignments. Europe has its own GDPR set of laws. US has its own data privacy laws. Without an adequate understanding of that, whatever data privacy or confidentiality or security concerns you will build up may not hold enough water to satisfy the legality of the jurisdiction of the country in which you are operating. So that I would say is first and foremost. Second, I would fully endorse Vijay's view that not investing in security adequately, it is costly, but not doing it is going to be fatal. Not only from a data privacy perspective, but even from your business continuity perspective, because this confidentiality can either make you a leader of the market, or it can open up your all the secrets and all the doors which are open to everybody to see, and then make use of it.
Okay.
This, I would say, from our understanding and our experience, could be the two critical components one has to continuously work upon. Technologies are evolving. You build a technology today, I'm sure there will be somebody else who will come who will be a better hacker and do it. But just to end on that note, I was reading the comment of one of the CISOs of a DD company, And she is commenting that a CISO in today's times must think like a criminal but act like a defender. And that is the only way to have the security concerns well established.
Thank you, Sandeep. So before I hand it back to Manoj or Kim, we have significantly run over time, but thank you all for a very thought-provoking, insightful, and very relevant discussion. And I'm sure all of us, as well as the audience, would have taken a few things which they can go back and implement. And even though we didn't have time to take questions, but I was going through the questions, and the good thing is pretty much amongst all of us, we were able to answer all the questions. So thank you very much for being there, and a special thanks to all my co-panelists. Back to Manoj.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of ASA, I would like to extend my deepest thanks and appreciation to our excellent chair, Vinod, and our stellar panelists, Vineet, Vijay, Sandeep, and Vikram. Thank you for all the thought that you put in for this and experience that you shared with us today that together made for an excellent discussion. I would also like to thank the team at ASA for putting together this event and this series, and Kim for her support organizing today's panel discussion. Finally, I would like to thank everyone who attended today for taking the time out and joining us on this session. If there are any further questions, please email them to us and we will get back to you. We will be sending across a summary of the points discussed along with the recording of this session tomorrow. With this, we come to the close of the Road to Recovery series. We thank you all for being a part of it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.